Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Women in Theater podcast. We're your hosts, Haley Goldenberg
and Amy Andrews. Grab a cozy beverage and join us as we talk to women and gender-expansive folks about their experiences at the intersection of womanhood and theater.
On the pod, we cultivate open conversations across identities and professional roles.
We look for opportunities to support one another in growing our careers.
And we pool our collective wisdom to build the equitable theatrical spaces of the future. Hey, Amy, good to see you.
Hi, Haley. It's wonderful to see you, too. Here we are.
I know, here we are. So how you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. The sun is shining. It's really freaking cold out, but I'm working on projects right now that I'm excited about, and this is one of them. So that's how I'm doing. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there is the answer. I'm holding it together. There are big picture things that I wish I could change, but I'm trying to focus on the positive. And being here with you always helps with that. So why don't we get started with our roses and thorns, Amy? What's your rose and what's your thorn for this week?
Let me see. My rose for this week is I'm thinking about some exciting ideas this week. It's sort of coming out of our Women in Theater in-person cozy networking event, but also just other conversations that I've been having with folks in and out of the theater industry about ideas around sharing of resources and just being scrappy and resourceful in times where resources feel scarce, like they're starting to in many ways. And I'm really excited and lit up by these conversations. So that's my rose for this week. My thorn for this week is just ongoing help stuff with my family. I personally am healthy today, and I'm so grateful for that. This time of year, especially with a little kiddo, it's really rough. It sometimes feels like one sickness bleeds into the next, and it just affects everything in my life, and it's not my favorite. Yeah, so that's my thorn. What about you? What are your rose and thorn this week?
My rose is my fabulous friends and family. Just blanket statement. I'm hearing a lot of people in difficult times talking about leaning on community, and I really feel so blessed to have a community of people that I love and respect so much who are doing the work to fight back against these systems that are trying to take away our voices, who are personally making me feel so special and supported and thought about. That's my rose for this week, is just spending time in gratitude, taking a look at the people in my life who I'm so lucky to share this moment in history with and this moment in my life with. I love my people. My thorn is the undervaluing of art in our society. I feel like we really need art right now more than ever to open our hearts and minds, to connect with one another, to remember that we have so much more in common than we have in difference, and that our differences also make us special and make us valuable contributors to society and to one another. And I think that broadly there is an undervaluing of the essential nature of art, and that pisses me off. I think that we need to change that. So that's my thorn. But I'm so excited for today's interview because we are speaking to Victoria Detres, who is the program manager for Rise Theater and a fabulous theater producer, among other hats that she wears. Vic is so inspiring, y'all. I can't wait for you to hear from her. Every time I talk to her, I'm inspired. Also, if you happen to listen to our Rise series last season, you would have heard a mini episode from Vic. So if you were clamoring for more, just like we were,
As we were,
today
yes.
is your lucky day. Yes.
Yeah, we had that little mini interview with Victoria at the Rise Summit back in September, and we finished that interview and we said, great, when are you coming on the podcast?
Yes, so we made it happen.
Here she is. We're so excited to share her with you and to chat and learn more about her. So let's get started. But first, for Women's History Month, we've teamed up with Expand the Canon to bring you a series of playwrights you should know about. This week's playwright you should know about is Hannah Cowley. Hannah Cowley is best known for writing The Bell's Stratagem. Her first play, which she wrote in a day, was supposedly inspired by going to the theater and telling her husband, well, I could write as well myself. #relatable. If you're thinking of producing The Taming of the Shrew, check out her play Bold Stroke for a Husband, written in 1783. Learn more about the play and Hannah Cowley on This is a Classic, a podcast by Expand the Canon. Victoria Detres is a Puerto Rican and Albanian producer born and raised in New York City. She is passionate about building a platform for contemporary theater's innovative voices, particularly those of the global majority. While highlighting these voices, Victoria also aims to dismantle the structures that do not allow for access and restructure for equity and accessibility. Formerly, Victoria has worked as the producing assistant at Octopus Theatricals and associate producer at Broadway and Beyond Theatricals. Victoria is one of the co-founders of the Rise Theater Directory in partnership with Lin-Manuel Miranda, the Miranda Family Fund, and Maestra Music. Currently, Victoria leads Rise Theater as the program manager. Victoria's additional credits include associate producer on The Kite Runner at the Hayes Theater, line producer on Society Theater Collective's productions of Mona Mansour's Beginning Days of True Jubilation, and Emily Zemba's The Strangers Came Today. Learn more at victoriadetres.com.
Hello, beautiful people. Vic, welcome to Women in Theater.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Vic, can you please share your pronouns and tell us a little bit about what you do in the theatrical spaces?
Yeah, my pronouns are she, her. I'm a producer. I came mostly from producing, and right now the work I do is more advocacy based, but I am one of the co-founders and the Rise program manager for Rise Theater, which is a program of Maestra Music. And essentially we have a directory, which is serving everyone in the industry who's working in non-performing roles, but designed in mind to intentionally amplify artists who are underrepresented. So women, trans, non-binary, deaf and disabled artists. And then in tandem, we have our network partners who are amazing organizations leading the work with promoting equity and accessibility in various lanes. So we create kind of a roadmap for the industry in case you are interested in furthering your equitable work.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you for all you do with Rise Theater. We are a proud network partner, and it's been such a fruitful relationship so far and just growing every day.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Vic, what is anything that's inspiring you right now?
I think right now it's hard to find inspiration. I think that's across the board. But when I think about what I do and the work that I do, when I meet people, that's what inspires me the most, because sometimes it feels so easy to feel siloed of like, and is the work that I'm doing even relevant, important? Like, why does it even matter? And then you meet people who are doing work for their community, whether it's in food banks or community organizing, and just seeing the passion of people willing to always put others first, I think is just like, that is the most essential thing. I think we forget that community is what makes us human. Empathy is what makes us human. And I think we're actually currently in an empathy drought. I think that's kind of at the core of how we got to where we are right now, right? The lack of empathy. Empathy is actually what makes us human. So when I get to meet people, that's what's the most inspiring. Just getting to hear their stories. Storytelling is the most innately human thing we can do. That's inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just speaking before you got on, Vic, during our pre-interview segment about how there's a lack of understanding that art is essential to society. And I think many of us artists can relate to that idea. But I think when you're talking about the drought of empathy, I just want to connect those two ideas, because I think that storytelling is one of the best ways that we can exercise our empathy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
One of the most radical things we can do in moments like this is lean into joy. So let's do that. Let's do that, and let's do our flash round of questions. So I'm going to start you off, Vic, with, if you were an animal, what would you be?
I think I would be either an aquatic animal or a bird of some sort. I'm going to out myself. I've become a bird watcher, not like legitimately, but I have a balcony and I'll just sit out there and be like, wow, birds are amazing. And I'm not talking about the pigeons. I have like cardinals in the back, and then I have like these mourning doves that come by. So I love watching birds. They can run away at any time. And I love the idea of having that freedom. But then I'm like, dolphins are so smart and so cool. Like, and I used to be obsessed with them as a child. I feel the most when I'm like by the ocean and by the sea. I think that's part of my heritage as well. Just like, so I feel like I would definitely be an aquatic animal or in the sky, because I'm also from the mountains in my heritage. So it's like something between those two.
What is your weirdest hobby? It can be bird watching.
I think I'm already out of myself. I think it's
I love it.
That's fine. That works.
What quote or mantra is speaking to you in this moment?
Okay, I actually have this on my wall because I haven't taken it down since I heard it, but I think it resonates all the time. But it says, "Failure isn't fatal, but hesitation might be." If you are someone with chronic and generalized anxiety, hello. But so much do you fear like what hasn't even come to fruition, right? So it's like I think in this moment, it's so easy to feel like silence is an easy way out, but that is hesitation. And it's like when you're actually silent, we're being complicit. So it's a nice little mantra to be like, sometimes you gotta try the scariest things because that's what pushes you. And then when you hesitate, you're actually hesitating and not betting on yourself in a way that I think needs to be kind of like thrown out the window. You need to bet on yourself all the time.
I love that. What's your favorite musical?
Okay. So I have two. I have Once, because that was my first ever Broadway musical. I love depressing. Like I love when a show doesn't wrap up with a bow because I'm like, that's actually the most realistic to life. But then I also love In the Heights because that was one of the first shows in which I actually saw myself. I'm born and raised New Yorker. It was a love letter to New York in a way that is actually really authentic and actually encompasses the general population of New York City. So those two are my favorites.
Vic, what's your song of the moment?
What is my song in the moment? So I was in the grocery store and you hear like when they're playing like one of those easy listening.
Like
I don't
smooth
know.
jazz?
Yeah. No.
My grocery store is playing like pop songs from when I was in high school and college, and it's
Exactly.
delightful.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it
Got it,
brought
got
me
it.
on this weird tangent where they were playing like the script, like The Man Who Can't Be Moved. So then I was
Yes.
like, oh yeah, that's like such a vibe. So then I like made it a Spotify playlist. And then I was like, this is great music. But then I realized I love the song Breathe, 3 a.m. I forgot
I
who's
love that song. Anna Nalick?
I
Is
think
that
so. Yeah,
3
yeah.
Yeah.
a.m.
Yeah.
and call me?
Yes.
Da,
Oh,
da,
I
da,
Yeah,
da,
yeah.
love
da.
that
Okay,
song.
great,
Yeah,
great. Okay.
it's just like
What a
it's like
vibe.
it's such a vibe. It's like weirdly
Yeah.
romantic but also depressing. So that's my song in the moment, which is
Yeah.
What a
so
great
random.
song. Yeah.
No,
Right?
I love it.
I
Thank
love
you for
that
sharing.
choice.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate the vulnerability to step into that. I
Thank
love
you. That
that.
took a lot
Yeah,
out
yeah,
of
yeah.
me.
Now that we are warmed up with that, let's get into the meat of this interview. So, how did you come to theater in the first place, Vic? What's your story?
How did I come to theater? I think most of us were probably little children being like, I want to be on Broadway. Or like watching musicals. I used to be obsessed with Annie. Like that was my movie. I think it's the 80s. There's a very distinct difference between which Annie is the good one. And I always wanted to work on Broadway or like work in theater. Like I had interest in it. And I was fortunate enough that in my elementary school, every year you had to do a show. Like so at the end of the year, there was always one performance. I was like, I really loved it. My parents were like, okay, cool. And throughout life, I was always doing theater programs, but I was always kind of on the outside of like my teachers didn't know where to place me. I was never cast as the ingenue. I was never going to be the leading lady. And then I was also kind of cast in like kind of problematic tropes. So I was always like,
Mm.
is this funny? But I stuck with it. And then when I went to college, I was having a crisis of confidence of like, what is my role in this? And I had done everything. I had done writing, I had done directing, and I did all of that. Even in college, I still didn't have like a single lane that I lived in. So I was like, I love theater. I'm majoring in it. I don't know what the hell that means. And fortunately, my senior year, we did a residency with Tectonic Theater Project where they taught us about their devising, which is moment work. And I was kind of living in that lane of everyman of doing all the things that I was doing. So I was kind of helping our director. I was one of the writers on the piece that we produced. And then I was actually kind of acting as a producer and then essentially also an actor. And then post graduation, I was like, okay, I'm going to be an actor or I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to do both of these things. And my first interview out of college, I met with the executive director of a small nonprofit called The Play Company. And he was like, I actually think you're a producer and we have a producing track if you're interested. I was like so desperate for a job. So I said, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever.
You're like, sure, tell me who I am, sir. All right.
Exactly. And then I did it and I was like, oh, this is exactly right. Like, this is the role that I had been organically doing for so long. It was like my brain finally felt like that validated of like, oh, this is the way I've always seen it, the chess pieces of this role. And then from there, I just kind of stuck with it. But it was just always like, I want to do the art. I want to make art. And for me, I hated the fact that like when you're a child, you're told to dream. And then at a certain age, you're told to get realistic. And that's how the arts is always approached of like, children need arts. But then there's a point in which you grow up. And I never wanted to lose that sense of whimsy and the inner child that like still needed that art to
Mm.
survive, you know?
Yeah, totally. Again, it
Totally.
kind of circles back to art being essential again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Vic, can you tell us about what you are working on creatively at the moment that's exciting you?
Yeah. Oh man, because I don't like free time, in addition to
Yeah.
my full time at Rise, I also produce work and I also produce new musicals. I am part of a company called Society Theater Collective. It's a very collaborative based model in which we work together. It was built off the joint stock method. We have a lot of actors, we have writers. I'm the only producer. Our last production was in 2022. We are exploring entanglement theory, which is a very weird concept. I can't tell you what it means, but it's science.
According to Caltech's Science Exchange, like other aspects of quantum science, the phenomenon of entanglement reveals itself at very tiny subatomic scales. When two particles, such as a pair of photons or electrons, become entangled, they remain connected even when separated by vast distances.
Yeah, it's one of those scientific concepts that feels like it's so human, like the way
Mhm.
that our lives become entangled with each other. I think it's so theatrical and exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're working on. We had this like hunch and we have a lot of workshops where we all meet together. We like write and we have Mona Mansour and Emily Zemba, who are our core writers for the team, and then Scott Illingworth as our director. And we just finished a week-long workshop. And basically right now they're like, hey, Vic, can you produce this? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm gonna be the producer of this. Just being in the room, it was just like set in an ordinary space of like a gas station. And there's just shit happening and you're like, "What is going on?" Like, I love being on the journey of what am I watching? Because I think the idea of entanglement theory is like it's going back to an earlier point of like empathy. When you are empathetic, you kind of become entangled in someone's world because you want to be part of their world. You want to give them the advice or the care that they need to go through this, right? So this play is also exploring of like what role do we play in each other's lives? And I think that's a
Mm.
core element that we need to lean into because to be witnessing art is to be invited in. And that's a big thing. An invitation is huge. And a lot of people don't have invitations in. So how can we lean more into that? So that got my juices flowing. I'm stressed out about the producing of it all. I'm like, wow, we have to raise a lot of money to do this. So we have a large cast and a large team. But just being in that room, I was like, oh yeah, this does matter. And then on top of that, I also am producing new musicals, which are searching for residencies. As we all know, money rules
Yeah.
the world. So it's just
Yep.
doing it.
Until it doesn't, it will.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Vic, you do so many different things. Like you said, free time is not something that's part of your world, really. So, do you have a creative mission that ties all the different types of work that you do together?
The reason why I do art is, again, it's because it's essential, right? But with my own lived experience, I had always felt like on the outside. So something that I'm trying to actively work against is how do we do better inclusion across the board? We have seen women taken out of the narrative, women not put on in spaces, but then also women of color. So my entire ethos, my mission is to produce new works, artists of color, of artists of the global majority, including trans, queer artists, those who have just been hidden in the margins. And I also think something that is hard for our industry is that if you don't have like 3 regional credits under your belt, you're not being considered. So how can I use my privilege as a producer to make sure that I'm helping new artists get into the room? And then also it's like advocating for myself of like, I've been working in this industry for a long time and I still am having a hard time with people not even remembering my name. My ethos is about producing work of the global majority, but also I really love work that explores magical surrealism that's grounded in reality because I think that is something that's really exciting. There is magic in the everyday, and I think we forget that. So I love exploring pieces with magic element.
I'm here for the magic. And finding the magic in the everyday is a really exciting journey for me right now in this particular moment.
Joy is radical.
Joy is radical, it's true. So I'd love to chat about womanhood and identity. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how womanhood fits into your identity and other aspects of your identity and how all of that has impacted your theatrical work?
My own lived experience has always felt like I think a lot about it. My mom was always like, "You're a little too." She's like, "You're too blunt." And I'd be like, "What do you mean?" And I would just be very. I've always been a very vocal person, and I noticed the ways in which my mom. This is not like blaming her in any way, but I saw the ways in which she had to protect me in a way that she wasn't protecting my brother, right? of like, you can't come off a certain way because then you won't get opportunities. And all the women in my family, I come from a very strong line of women, but we also come from a line of like where the patriarchy was really strong, in which their voices were silenced. So I do think that my parents raised me to be this very strong and vocal woman. And then I was encountering so many experiences in which my identity was told that that is not okay for you to take up that space. And I have seen it in ways in which I have had female mentors that have let me down, not on purpose, but because they also have to protect themselves. It's a constant navigation of values, but also how do you move through the boys club of this industry that I think still is very strong. I'm a very charming person, and I know I have to use that to my advantage, because it's kind of like you have to play a little dumb in order to get ahead. If I show people how smart I am at the get go, I'm immediately a threat. So actually, how do I have to navigate that? And it's exhausting. We all know about code switching, especially when you are a woman of color, like how you have to play into that. But then also there's the very practical of like, if you are a woman, you're more susceptible to being hit on in a space in which you're just trying to be a leader. There will always be this natural disadvantage in the way that I present. And I even think about like some days I'll present because I'm queer. I'll make sure that I'm presenting in a way that's not fitting the male gaze, but it's actually fitting the female gaze. And how does that make people interpret me in a different way when I walk into the room? I think it's essential. I think womanhood, I can't ever run away from it. So how can I embrace it? It's embracing my natural charms, which is so gross to say out loud. But it's also just knowing that I am going to have to play into other people's perceptions of me before I can always show up as myself. And that's a scary place to be, I think. But then also, how can I use that to my advantage? Oh, I'm so charming and cute. Give me what I want.
I just want to highlight what you said, Vic, for a sec. It's like the leaning into being underestimated. But then sometimes being underestimated then works against you. So it's just like this, there's so much to navigate.
Exactly. And it's like, it's why women are so good at strategy. Like, there's a reason Athena is the goddess of war because strategy, women know strategy. And to be a woman in this industry is to constantly navigate that. It shouldn't be that way, but I've learned that there's always going to be those perceptions that lead before I can lead in the room.
With all of that, Vic, if you could make a change to the industry, I know you're fighting for a lot of changes right now, but what is one change that you think could, have a ripple effect and make a lot of change?
The thing is, it's not just one change because I think every change will have a trickle down effect. And I think there's the Venn diagram of changes. We need more male allies to advocate for us. I've been very fortunate. Like, men have really shaped my career. I think in this industry, women are pitted against each other in a way that's really icky and gross. And sometimes with the scarcity mindset of it all, I talk about this at Rise all the time of the scarcity mindset is that if I have it, I have to hold on really tight because I'm not sure I'll have it for that long. That mentality drives so much in this industry. I'm not like some amazing person. I still suffer from that as well. Of like, when you get into a room, you're like, fuck, how did I get here? And you worry that like your time is limited, right? I think about it when I see someone else who's another producer doing really well. I'm like, God, well, they're doing this. How could I ever compete? Like, I'm not there yet. But then I have to remind myself that my journey is my own journey. Divine timing is right. With that, I think we need more male allies to kind of advocate. And we need men to speak up about when they see things that are icky, to call it out in the room. We need more resource sharing in this industry. That is something I'm also trying to work with Rise of like that is again fighting against scarcity mindset of like, hey, this marketing tactic worked really well for us. Right now, we're seeing turnover for shows at like an exponential rate. It's really, really sad to see. So much of that work has been in development for years. So imagine you finally
Yeah.
get your run. It's so short lived. It's devastating. And I think we are missing the grace period of like the grace that we give ourselves, but the grace we give one another. I also think that like ultimately we need to have a large conversation that overall the system isn't working. How are we shifting it? And I
Yeah.
think there are people who will still profit from the system who are unwilling to talk about that. because if it were to change, they might not be as successful. But a large majority of the pie is struggling. And again, it comes back to the empathy. It's the lack of empathy right now,
Well, and the rugged individualism, right? Like
right?
that sort of
Yeah,
idea of like, oh, well, I'm just going to like bootstrap my way. Like it ties back to this idea of the American dream and like where we are in
right.
our society. Like, and what you were saying before, Vic, of like, if somebody else wins, I lose. And
Exactly.
realistically, that isn't true. And that's what the people benefiting from the system want us to think because it will keep us siloed and it will keep us down and it will keep us from succeeding. But what we know is that a rising tide will lift all boats, and we
Yes.
have to actually
Exactly.
like continue to live that and act on that idea.
I just wanted to highlight what you said about giving ourselves grace and giving each other grace, which also connects back to the idea of empathy. It feels like there's not a lot of space for difference or uniqueness or originality or imperfection. And that is a big piece of the problem that we need to be talking about as a community and as an industry.
I also think that has been bred from the wellness culture of hell that we've experienced of like, you
Mm.
need to be your authentic self on social media. And it's like, how many of us are tired of seeing someone be like, oh my God, I've been drinking lemon water and my life is so much better. Like, no one wants that right now. Like, can we be
Take
actual
your lemon
authentic?
water out of here.
You
We
like,
don't want it.
please. I love that we had this big move towards authenticity and like being our best selves on Instagram and social media. We need that pushed. But then capitalism ruined everything because then just became a ploy.
Yeah, because now authenticity is for sale, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and now it's this consumerist thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, I do think there needs to be a shift in, and I will say this, I should really trademark it at this point, but I think there needs to be a new version of culture of care. We need to create a culture of care that is non-existent right now. How are we taking care of each other in this time? That's the only way we're gonna survive. I think about what I did with the Rise Summit of like that day was something that I was dreaming about of like, what does it look like to have a collective day for, and then in the moment, it was exactly what I had hoped it would be. It was like, "Oh, this actually is really powerful to actually say there's a space for all of us to meet and talk," because when you actually put the resources into taking care of your community, everyone does well. Like, it's just a basic thing, but I think right now we're lacking that, and I'm trying to find ways in which our industry can be better integrators of culture of care and how that starts with everything. It starts with accessibility at the front door. It involves accessibility in the budget when we're building things. It involves having folks who don't look like one another at the same table so that we can talk to each other about what we might be missing because we all have our own lived experience that's going to influence the way we work and lead. But if we're not having multiple voices at the table, we are going to have some huge oversights that are going to affect those who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And I just want to applaud you for the work that you're doing with Rise and at the summit, because even just in our personal sphere and in our organization, we've been able to do so much better at meeting our community needs just from getting to meet other folks and hearing what is needed and getting in a room together. So much of what we do at this project also is about getting people in a room together and
Yeah.
figuring it out and, showing up and being a real community. I think that when you're talking about the culture of care and you're talking about how are we showing up for one another, like that's what I keep thinking about is like, how do we get the entire theater industry like in a room
Yeah.
together, like across, experience levels, different roles, like all of these things. If we're in proximity and we can see, then like there's more that we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I want you to know, Vic, the Rise Inaugural Summit was an incredible day. We had an amazing time there, and we met such interesting people, and we heard such interesting conversations, and we had such interesting conversations. And also, that work is continuing. Like, we are
Yeah.
behind the scenes continuing to chat with the organizations that we met there and meet new people and form new collaborations and
Yeah.
partnerships, and ideas are growing, and it's all so exciting, and that's because of the work that you and the rest of the Rise team put into that. So good on you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot. That's it. Like it's just once you meet someone, it's opening doors to what we do. Art is a collaboration. Even a one woman show still has a whole team of staff helping that one woman show happen, right? We forget that this is the most collaborative art form that does exist. So why are we shying away from that in every other facet of the industry?
we talked already, Vic. We mentioned your lack of free time. I'll underline it again. So, how do you think about balancing your creative work with the rest of your life?
Boundaries is like one of the hottest words I know in my vocabulary. It's
Boundaries
like
are sexy, listeners.
boundaries are so sexy. Like Valentine's Day, call me up. Boundaries. For me, I have been very vocal about like my needs. I don't answer emails before 10 or after 6. Like that is just a boundary. My work day is Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. I'm not trying to ignore you, but like my weekends are the time that I have. And even then, I don't even have my weekends fully free, right? So really setting clear boundaries with work has been one way in which I take care of myself. I also do this thing where I always set some days of the week for outings, like for shows. I usually do Wednesday through Friday because I'm like Monday and Tuesday, like at least can be home making a meal for myself. And like I think we
Mm.
forget that just having opportunity to cook for yourself is self-care. Then this is like a thing I coined. And I love my future self. Like past Vic loves herself so much. So like I know I do this thing where I'll always just have like a snack for myself. Like I'll have a vision on Monday and be like, this Friday, I know I'm gonna want a chocolate cupcake. And then I'll like prep it. And then on Friday, I'm like, that's Vic. She loves herself so much. So I'm really good at like setting myself up for success of like little treats throughout the week.
Building treats for
That's
yourself. That's so
amazing.
brilliant.
I
I'm gonna
love
steal
it.
that.
So it's just that. So that's how I do it. It's really radical self-care in a way that doesn't always like take a lot out of me. And then I've had an injury. I fractured my ribs, so that's been terrible. But I used to go
Oh,
to the
I'm
gym every
sorry.
morning. Yeah, it's a bummer. But I used to go to the gym every morning, and for me, that was at least one designated form of self-care each day,
Hmm.
which is also kind of like a meditation in it. So I'm
Yeah.
waiting to go back to that today as well.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I get
beautiful.
that. I love what you said too about the boundaries around when you go to shows, that or like what your outing nights are, like when
Yeah.
you're gonna go out and when you're gonna stay home. Because I love people and I love doing things, and I sometimes like end up overpacking my schedule with things and people that are all wonderful, but then I'm like, why am I so burnt out or so tired? And it's like I actually need a few nights a week to like stare at the wall and eat a meal at home.
So, Vic, you are doing such amazing work in so many areas. I would love to hear you talk a bit about what does success look like for you personally, and then what does success look like for you like in the broader theater industry? What's the beautiful vision that you're working toward?
I think it's very funny that you asked that because I think I'm in a place where that is shifting. This industry kind of feels like I think frustrating in that sometimes it feels like if you don't have a Tony, especially if you're a producer, you are not going to be taken seriously. Of like you need a certain amount of accolades in order to be seen as successful. But for me, I have been really trying to like level set for myself of like again, producing is a role of advocacy. So for me, if my artist dreams are coming to fruition, then I am successful because that is all I'm doing. So for me, success looks like, did I hit the goals of this artistic project? That is successful to me. I think a lot about with Rise. It's what I did at the Rise Summit. That was a huge success. But for me, success in the advocacy lane looks like how can I use my own privilege to make sure that I'm being the conduit of connection and actually living true to the values and the mission set with Rise? And I like to think that's what success looks like. But for me, in this industry as a larger whole, I am thinking a lot about sustainability. If we can reach a place in which the work that I'm doing is allowing all of us to be more sustainable in our systems, then that will be the ultimate like indicator of my success. I did that. For me, I'm really interested and want to continue exploring creative placemaking in the industry of like, I don't think we can rely on the government right now. So how can we rely on the city that we live in to take care of one another? So actually creating more programming that is the fusion of city planning and arts planning. And I think those need to speak to each other a lot more. And that is
Right.
the goal and the work that I hope I can continue doing. And the thing is, I don't know what that looks like. I'm kind of building the ship as I'm steering it. But for me, success looks like listening to the needs of the folks that I say that I'm helping and actually making sure that I, even if it's like a larger goal, what are the small steps I'm doing to get us there? And ultimately, if my community is actually feeling like the needs are being met, then that is successful to me.
Wow. I said it early that you were going to be a beacon of light today. And that was like that. I feel like I just basked in your sunshine. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. I have a little sunflower pen over here too.
Oh gosh,
That's
there
so
you go. I love
perfect.
it. That's perfect. When you're talking about the sustainable future, it's like this is it. You're steering the boat as you build it, but you are building it and it's happening. Even if you don't see all of the ways that that has been playing out, like it does, even when you're not physically in the space. You're the work that you're doing spiritually is continuing outward. So
Absolutely. And what you were saying earlier about the importance of investing in yourself and believing in yourself and taking those big risks. Like, yes, build the ship while you're sailing it.
Yep.
It's got to be built. Yeah, I love the vision of a sustainable world, especially because if we can make that a reality, that can take us through governments that are friendly to the arts. It can take us through governments that are not friendly to the arts. It can allow for more stability within a very unstable industry.
well,
Yeah.
and the art that we're making that is meant to speak to people that have not been prioritized, let's say, in our society, will hopefully have a better chance of reaching them. That's the other thing.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wow. Big stuff.
Lots to think about.
Vic, we could talk to you all day,
All
but I'm
day.
gonna give you our last question here.
Okay.
So, what are you the most proud of in your life and in your work so far?
Mm. What am I most proud of? I would say Rise is one of my biggest achievements. It means so much to me. And I think I'm going to share the story of like how it came to be because I think that actually speaks to everything. I always said that like I was doing this work organically. I was in producing offices in which I was creating a list of 10 designers of color that they should know about and pitching them and not being heard and like always being that voice of like, hey, let's consider who's not being in the room, right? And I've had the privilege of being one of the only in the room. But this job, I I butchered this interview so bad. Like it was one of the worst interview experiences of my life, and I never heard back. And I was like, cool.
Wait, for Rise, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't hear back and I was like, cool, cool. And that was like in September. Didn't hear anything. And I was like, cool, cool. And then 3 months later, I get a call or it's like an email of like, hey, we haven't been able to find anyone and your name came up. Would you be interested in like grabbing a coffee? And apparently the folks hiring went to people they trusted in their community and said, who do you think is the person for this role? And my name came up. And for me, I fully believe that like what's meant for you will never pass you by. And this work, it meant so much to me. The thing is, we had this idea, we're like, we're launching this directory and then figure it out. And then I was like, and then they're like, oh, and there's partners, figure that out. So, so much of this has just been like, what trial and error and trial by fire, really, of like everything that I'm planning is just by listening and trying to figure out like what resources do I have within this whole like stifling, like siloed nonprofit that doesn't have many resources, but what resources can I give? And I think relationships is one of my strengths, right? Like building relationships is what matters to me. And through that work, like that is a great success of my life, making sure that the relationships I maintain, if you are in my life, there's a reason you're in my life. And I want you to know that because life is so short. I want everyone to know that I love them and I care for them. And I say I love you a lot. And I know that's alarming to people, but I want you to know that I love you. Even if you're like, okay, that's a lot, that's a big word. I love the work that I do. I love the people that I work with because I only do it for you all. And I'm not even trying to sound like so obnoxious, like white savior bullshit, but like I love seeing the work and I care about people so deeply that for me, this is a great success in my life to be able to say, I can take care of the people that I say I'm going to by showing up for them.
That's
What a
so
way to end the
beautiful.
interview. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Vic.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. For
Thank
sharing your
you.
wisdom and yeah, just all of the incredible work you're doing. We're so grateful that you're in this space, and I personally feel inspired to be living in the same moment as you and in the same like broader community. So thank you.
Feeling
Yeah.
is so mutual. Are you kidding me? You
Oh
guys are
my
amazing.
gosh. We're
Thank you for
so
having me.
excited about all the
Yeah.
things you're doing, all the things you're gonna do. Like we're
Thank you.
following along. We're big fans.
So before we actually run, Vic, can you tell our listeners where they can find you and find more information about Rise on the internet and beyond?
You can check my Rise profile at work.risetheater with an RE .org. You can find me on LinkedIn. And there's a website. If you're like, what does she actually do? Go check out. It's victoriadetres.com. and stay connected. Follow us on social media. Learn about the amazing work that our partners do, including Women in Theater. Obviously, you do if you're listening to this. But yeah, that's it.
Great.
Fabulous. Thank you so
Fabulous.
much, Vic.
Oh my God, thank you. This was so lovely.
Thank you
Right.
so much, Vic.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All right, bye.
Oh my God. I love Vic. That was so great.
What a great interview. Yeah. I love that Vic, she can just like speak to the heart of the truth about something. She's such a wide person. And I love how community focused she is, both in terms of using the resources within the community and also like what can we do to listen to the community needs and to meet them to serve the community, which is very aligned with what we do at Women in Theater. It's such a
Yeah.
good interview.
Yeah. I want to underline culture of care because that
Ah,
was a big takeaway
yes.
for me in this interview.
Yes.
And I also want to underline because I feel like we didn't take enough time to highlight this in the moment, but producing is advocacy.
Yes,
Whoa.
that was a big one.
I just want
Yeah,
to say
I
whoa
love that.
because at our community event the other week, in the way that we talk about problems in the industry, people often focus on producing and what producers can do, and that producers need to do X. Producers need to allow for more diversity in the space, like whatever the thing is. And I think the idea of producing as advocacy is sort of just a radical mind shift that if producers were thinking of their work as advocacy work, how much that could shift the industry. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think about producing the same way. And you're right, these conversations keep coming up about the people in positions of power, which is producers. They're the ones with the money and the resources and who make things happen. And
But it's also theater owners, and I feel like there's
yeah,
not
it's also
enough
theater owners too.
focus on that too. But
Right.
yeah.
And the idea that if you are a person who holds power in this industry, you are always advocating for something, whether it is conscious or unconscious. And for some people, what you are advocating for, whether you know it or not, is a continuation of the status quo and a continuation of the patriarchy being in power and people
And
in
white supremacy
marginalized
being in
communities.
power.
Yeah, and people in marginalized communities not having a voice and not seeing themselves represented or having the opportunity to be in spaces. So yeah, it's certainly something that I think a lot about as a producer. And I love that Vic brought that up and just like threw that gem into the conversation. So
So casually,
yeah, so
producing as
casual.
advocacy. Yeah, I love
It's
it. I love
great.
it. Well, and I think
Yeah.
about my favorite producers that I've worked with so far who, granted are a lot of up and comers, but some who are more established also. And they approach it this way, I'm an
Yeah.
advocate for the issues that I care about. I'm an advocate for the people and the artists that I'm working with. Like that mindset and people first is sort
Yeah.
of lacking in the industry. And I think it could change a lot if we
But
had a
it's also
contingent.
happening. Like
Well,
it's
it is
lacking
happening. Yes.
and
Yes.
it's lacking and it's happening. There's a
Yeah.
sea
Both things are
change
true.
happening, which is
Mhm.
exciting.
So how can we continue to like bring that to the forefront and just, yeah, sit with that, listeners. Producing
Very
is advocacy.
exciting.
Okay,
Yes.
well, I feel really inspired. So why don't we take a moment to uplift more people who inspire us,
Let's
Amy?
do
Who's your
it.
trailblazer of the week?
Oh my gosh. I have 4 trailblazers of the
4.
week. This week I do.
That's
But
a
it's
lot
for
of
good reason.
trailblazers.
It is a lot of trailblazers, and it's because there are fabulous new Women in Theater expanded team, and I'm
yes.
so excited about
Yes.
all of them, and I just
Okay,
have to
that's
shout
good.
them
That's a
all
good one.
out. Yes, because they are literally helping us blaze our trails while they are also blazing their own trails
Okay,
as
that was a
artists
hot way
and
to say that.
creatives.
That was
Thank
hot,
you.
Amy. Good job.
Yeah, so I want to shout out to Beth Rosebrook, our fabulous social media assistant, Sylvia Blair, our fabulous events coordinator,
Who
and
crushed it at the event the
crushed
other
it.
week.
Just
so
crushed
good.
it. And Courtney Seil and Ali Veritek, who are our amazing grants assistants. And we are at the very beginning of this journey of expanding our Women in Theater team and bringing more people onto this project. And the people that have chosen to come on this journey with us are just, they're such good people. And I'm so excited about the work we are doing with them, the work we will do with them. I'm just like, I'm overjoyed. It lights me up in ways that I can't even say. So yay, shout
That's
out
a good
to
one.
our Team Women in Theater Trailblazers of the Week. So Haley, who's your Trailblazer of the Week this week?
My trailblazer of the week is someone who I got the pleasure of meeting through our community event, and that is Kate Willard.
Yes,
None of
Kate.
us knew Kate before. I think she said she heard about us through the Rise
I know.
newsletter. or Broadway briefing or something. And she showed up not knowing anyone. And boy, did she make a splash in the community discussion. She had so many good ideas, great questions. One of the things we talked about at the event was pay transparency. And one of the things that Kate suggested, which is such a simple thing, was putting together like a community Google sheet where people can say, this is the theater I worked at. This is the job that I did at that theater, and this is how much I was paid for that job. And that kind of blew my mind because there are so many simple things that we can do to make the space more transparent and more equitable. We just forget about our power, and that's such a beautiful example. And Kate had so many good ideas, and she also talked about like universal basic income for artists in France as like a model for art being prioritized in society, like we've been talking about, can look. And that was so
That was
mind-blowing.
really interesting. Yeah, she was talking about the intermittent system in France, which is like unemployment, but for artists, and it's like actually living pay, like livable pay,
it
unlike
functions
unemployment
like
it
functions
in
more
the
like
US.
UBI than like
Yeah,
unemployment.
exactly.
Yeah. Where you can, if you log a certain number of hours as an artist, you can qualify for like $1,200 a month or something. It was
Yeah,
like
I
a
think
pretty
that
high
was what
number.
Kate said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So shout out to Kate, and thanks for coming to our event. And
Thank you.
we're always looking to expand our community. So we'll keep you posted, folks, on where you can show up to the next one.
Yeah, and if you are inspired by any of these topics that we're chatting about on the podcast and you want to be a part of these conversations, please reach out, like over email, over social media. We are happy to have these conversations with you. We will introduce you to people who are having these conversations. We want these conversations to happen, and we want to be a part of it. So join us.
Yes, fabulous. I want to hype you up, Amy, for something that I brought up earlier on this podcast when I brought up my rose, which is that I'm really grateful to my people for supporting me. You've done such a great job of showing up for me, both in this project and as my friend in the last few weeks, because I've just been struggling. That's like the hashtag struggling sound.
Hashtag struggling.
Struggling. And it's really helpful to know that you're thinking about me and that you are a person who I can lean on and that I can rely on, like I said, in this project and in life. So thank you for that. I love you and I appreciate you.
I love
And
you
I want to hype you up for being a good friend. So there you go.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. Right back at ya. Yay. Amazing. Yeah, I want to hype you up today because you came in a really hashtag struggling place.
I did.
Like a little
she's
theme
not
song.
shading me, listeners. I was just came on and she was like, "How are you?" And I was like,
Not good.
No.
Yeah, but I love how open you were during this interview and how you let it in. You let the light shine in and inspire you. And I mean, Vic is such an amazing person to be inspired by. But it was so joyful to me to see you experiencing the joy and inspiration going through this interview. You could easily have sat there and been like, oof, I'm having a bad moment in my life and I'm not going to move from that. But you were open and vulnerable and like allowed that moment of joy to come in. And I really think that's wonderful. So
Thank
hyping
you.
you up, Rockstar.
Thank you. Joy is radical, listeners.
It's radical.
That's the thing. I believe it, but sometimes it's hard to let it in when things are scary out there, you know?
Yeah. So listeners, embrace that radical joy. Find your joy today.
Find your joy today, this week, and go shine your light on everybody who is willing to take it in. Yeah. I love you so much. We actually have a programming update for you.
Yes. Haley, my fabulous co-host, is going to be away for the next couple of months because she's working on a super exciting out-of-town production of a fabulous show. I'm so excited for her, and I know we all are. But because of that, listeners, we are going to be doing a little programming break. So thank you for listening to the first half of Women in Theater Podcast Season 5.
It's Season 5, Part 1, babes.
Season 5, Part 1. And guess what? You have a little time to listen back and enjoy these episodes and drink in all the wisdom.
Catch up. It's time.
Yeah. And we will be back in a couple months' time with Part 2 of Season 5. And meanwhile, keep chatting with us on social media. Feel free to reach out if there's any conversations you want to have. Come to our virtual co-working event. And we will see you right back here on our video podcast for the second half of Season 5. Thank you so much for being here with us.
So yeah, we love you. Like we said, go shine your light, and we'll see you in a couple months. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Looking for community and accountability? Drop in and join us for our next virtual co-working session on Tuesday, April 8th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring yourself, your creative projects and ideas, and a cozy beverage, and let's get stuff done. To get the Zoom link, visit the community events page on our website or check out the link in the show notes.
Programming update. Stay tuned for part 2 of Season 5 of the Women in Theater podcast, coming to you June 3rd. Thank you for listening to the Women in Theater podcast. We're your hosts, Haley Goldenberg
and Amy Andrews. If you like what you heard, subscribe and give us a 5-star review wherever you listen.
You can also follow us on social at Women in Theater Project to make sure you never miss an episode.
The music for this show is written by talented Women in Theater community member Chloe Geller.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.